Going a little bit older with this one, but not too old. You can actually see a sticker on the front that tells us a little bit of information. From what I glean, it's a 386 PC from something 2013, and a bunch of question marks on the motherboard. Be interesting to see if this one works. One thing we can see right off the bat, this has an AMI BIOS, which, I have to be perfectly honest with you, I much prefer over the Phoenix one. It's a lot simpler to deal with, and a lot less buggy too. We got a couple of 16-bit ISA cards. One of them is the video card, the other one is the I/O card, because this is an old enough system that none of the input-output, floppy drive, hard drive, serial parallel, any of that stuff, none of that's integrated with the motherboard. It's all provided by an add-in controller. The system is all ISA, as you would probably expect. There's a couple of 8-bit slots, and it's mostly 16-bit. I believe there were a total of 6 or 7 slots on this system. Now here's something special. This is an AMD 386DX 40 MHz CPU. The AMD 386DX40 came rather late in the life of the development of the 386, and I believe that it was the fastest 386 you could buy. A lot of enthusiasts liked it because it performed equal to or better than some of the 486 chips that were out at the time. And here's the math coprocessor, and it's here that I'm going to talk about the differences between the 386 and the 486, specifically with what the SX and DX mean with those two CPUs. The 486, if you had a DX, you had an onboard math coprocessor. If you had an SX, the math coprocessor was either defective and disabled, or in later production versions, removed entirely. And thus you had to have an external 487 coprocessor. We'll talk about that a little bit later. With the 386, SX versus DX referred to external bus widths. The 386 SX was intended for use with roughly converted 286 class motherboards, and thus had a 16-bit data and 24-bit address bus. I might have them reversed, but I'm pretty sure it's 16-bit data and 24-bit address. Whereas the DX was a full 32-bit CPU. Obviously, you can see a DX is what's in use here. The 80387 math coprocessor that you used had to match both the bus width and the clock speed of the CPU that you had installed. It was a real problem for users of the 386DX40 because there were not a lot of 40 MHz DX 387 class coprocessors. But this is one of them, made by ULSI Systems, and we can see that it is an advanced math coprocessor, which probably means that it packs quite a few enhancements as compared to the original 387 design. Here's another name you might not see too common on PC motherboards any longer, Macronics. They made the chipsets on this machine. Here we can see the memory slots. Rather interestingly, even though we've got the high-performance CPU, they chose to go with the lower-performance 30-pin SIMMs. Who knows? I don't really see a date of manufacture on this motherboard. It's possible that it's old enough that 30-pin SIMMs were still commonplace in the PC market. And here we can see the first real sign of bad news. A lot of older systems, 286, 386, 486, even some Pentium machines, had these barrel-style NiCad rechargeable batteries, 3.6 volts. It's a bunch of, they look like little coin cells stacked on top of each other with a wrapper put over top of them. When the systems were new, these batteries were recharged when the system was turned on. Nowadays, they are bad news. You can see this one is leaking, and that's what these things like to do. So you need to remove these, because if you let them go, they will leak and they will destroy your motherboard. I've seen it far too many times. There are a couple different ways you can remove these. The technically correct way to do it would be to remove the motherboard and desolder the leads from the motherboard. But the easy way to do it is to just wiggle the battery back and forth until the leads break, because most motherboards, you don't really need to put something else there anyway. They have connection points for an external battery. And as we could see here, we've definitely had a change in configuration over the years. The VGA board has moved, probably because it's been upgraded from an 8-bit type to a 16-bit type. There used to be 2 serial ports, we're now down to 1 of those, and it looks like the slot has moved for that as well. There's no game port any longer. So, definitely some upgrades that have been seen over the years. Interestingly, it looks like this is an information sticker for the power supply, but it's not attached to the power supply at all. Again, very similar to the 286, we get 8 beeps out of the PC speaker, which indicates a video card problem. Although in this case, the cause is a little bit different. Video problem. Change of pace here a little bit, since there really wasn't much I could do with that other machine without swapping parts. Here's another one. This one's a 486 class machine. Here's a CPU, 486DX. This one's 33 megahertz, so it's a little bit slower than our 386 friend. Beside that, we can actually see some cache memory, which will serve to bump up the performance quite a bit. And just beyond here, we can see poking out an SIS chipset. Well, back in the 486 days, SIS really was not a bad choice for a PC chipset. And hiding underneath there, an AMI BIOS. Again, very nice to see, rather than a Phoenix. You can see just poking down there, more 30-pin SIMMs. This one's been fully maxed out, which is interesting to see. Also interesting to see is that apparently all of the add-in cards that were installed, or at least most of the add-in cards that were installed when this thing was in regular use, are still here. Looking at the I/O board right now, playing around with the IDE ribbon cable that is attached to it. Once again, the system predates any of the integration of these controllers onto the motherboard. Just off the top of my head, this system had a data acquisition card, a SCSI card, video card, and 2 I/O controllers. There's a lot of communication boards here we can see once again some information. I focused in on that Hydro approval sticker on the back. This would have been used to operate heavy equipment in a testing lab, so that was required back when this system would have been new. And we can see another one of those evil soldered batteries poking up, although I believe this one's actually been changed because not only was it not leaking, but it was actually good. So I just left it in there. The ones that are dead are the ones that you need to remove. The ones that are still okay, I'd leave them in there but watch them carefully. Again, always make sure that the power switch is turned off before plugging the system in, otherwise you might get a surprise. You know, very interestingly, the beep code that we got when the system powered up.
Sounds like a video problem to me.
It's 2 beeps, so it would normally indicate a problem in the first 64 kilobytes of memory, but yet the system powered on just fine afterwards. Very strange behavior. I've now gone ahead and hooked up the floppy drive in the system.
Oh, I know what I forgot. What's making that noise for? Because it died. Yeah, there it goes. That's colorful.
See, back in those days, you could customize your BIOS to your heart's content. Well, as long as the only customization you wanted was changing the color.
Let me see if I can change the colors on that. It's be a little bit more standard.
Note how slow it's redrawing the screen. That has nothing to do with the BIOS, that's got everything to do with the video card, which is actually a Paradise card, and if I remember right, Paradise video cards basically came out of their acquisition of Western Digital's video card business. Yes, Western Digital, the hard drive manufacturer, was in the business of making video chipsets. Our time has drifted, but it hasn't gone all the way back to 1980, so that's a good sign.
Alright, that's not right. Apparently that battery's actually good. No. Is it leaking? It's not leaking. That battery is somewhat good.
Very strange to see an option for daylight savings time in a BIOS. I think that's the first time I have seen that. Note that there's no support for the 2.88 megabyte format on this BIOS. Here's a curious option, the Waytech processor, which, as best as I remember it, was a math coprocessor on steroids. Could even outperform the system's own CPU, and take it over if required. Wasn't a very common option.
Really slow. Apparently turbo does not do anything. Interesting. Oh, the switch is dirty. Ah. Oh. SCSI card. That might not work too well. I might hang on that just the prize missing. Didn't tell me my thing wasn't ready, so.
Once again, if you run into this situation where the floppy drive light is on solid, it's because you have hooked it up backwards. Probably should have known that, considering the way the cable was installed.
Oh, probably because it's hooked up backwards. Wonder why it's doing that. Okay, well, that's probably working fine.
In an attempt to try and get this one working, you can see I've changed the memory configuration around a little bit. Although, having looked back on it, I don't believe that what I've got this set up as is even a legal memory configuration in the first place.
Did it work? It's completely silent. I don't like that. Oh, it didn't turn on. Oh, I missed the button, I guess. It didn't beep at me.
You can see now that the system is completely lifeless.
Better than a hammer.
Do make careful note that it appears as though the video card is halfway out of the socket. Never a good sign. So you can see here, this is the video card from the other machine. This is its Paradise chipset.
Should be. It's not bringing it in.
You can see that now that I've returned the memory configuration to what it was before, the system works just fine with the other video card. Apparently I'm blind. The cache memory is right there, sitting underneath the video card.
I didn't think I paid attention to it. Let's see, maybe.
See, now what I've done is I have removed that evil battery. We can see where it's leaked. Only out one side. It's very interesting how these batteries only leak out of one of the terminals, but not both. What we're looking at right now is the connection for the external battery, and unlike a lot of these, this one's actually labeled as to which one is positive and which one is negative. Because I can't leave well enough alone, I've gone ahead and taken that other video card, which is actually a Trident card of some kind, and put it on the 486 just to see what would happen. Alright, and back to the 386 now. Now we're installing the floppy drive.
Okay, that's good. Drive not ready. Wow, what the hell?
When in doubt, just try another floppy drive.
That's not like it. Same error message though.
Because I trust that this floppy drive works, I have now installed it properly in the case,